Victorian Equal Opportunity Act of 1984 gives the legal framework for cases of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is unlawful. In this state, the Assistant Commissioner for Equal Opportunity administers this legislation and handles discrimination cases that are brought to the Commissioner's office. Dr. Ian Siggins is the Assistant Commissioner for Equal Opportunity and he's with us today. Ian, welcome. Why should anyone do anything about sexual harassment?
The underlying legal and human basis for having this in the Equal Opportunity Act is the idea that everyone has the right to the quiet enjoyment of their work. People should not be subjected to distress or discomfort or pressure or assault or any of those sorts of behaviours because of their sex or their race or their religion or their politics. And sexual harassment is in the Equal Opportunity Act because of all those forms of pressure that cause people not to enjoy their work. The harassment, especially of women by men, is a sufficient community problem that the Parliament has written it into law. Now, obviously, harassment can be not only of women by men, but of men to men, women to men, and so on. Nevertheless, the one that is widespread and that creates loss of morale, loss of productivity, resignations, sickies, all those sorts of things, is mainly, for cultural reasons, the sort of pressure that men feel entitled to put women under at work. And I think that the schools are not free of this. Now, the thing about sexual harassment that impresses me is that it's not very sexy. It has more to do with power and with reinforcing certain cultural stereotypes than it does with anything genuinely affectionate, and that if it was real affection that was being expressed, there would not be a problem. Now, there is now a division in the Equal Opportunity Act which makes it the responsibility both of the Ministry of Education as the employer and of any teacher who is the supervisor of another teacher to create an environment in the schools which is free of harassing behaviour.
Right, fairly specific. We do have another guest with us today to discuss these issues. Libby McMillan is the Manager of Equal Employment Opportunity within the Ministry of Education and is responsible for the implementation of the sexual harassment policy and guidelines. Her work includes involvement in particular cases of discrimination. Welcome to the program. Libby, would you outline what the guidelines are? Because they're rather new and I don't think many people have had an opportunity yet to familiarise themselves.
Well, the guidelines have been drawn up because the Ministry, as an employer, has a responsibility to ensure that we do in fact undertake our proper responsibility under the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act of 1984. The guidelines provide information as to who is responsible for the implementation of the policy and who people can complain to if in fact they do want to make a complaint. We highlight in our policy the fact that management has a major responsibility, that supervisors, as discussed already by Ian, have a vicarious responsibility, and that all teachers and the unions involved in schools have a responsibility to ensure that every school is a sexual harassment-free workplace. The number of people that people can complain to are listed within the guidelines, and people are able to choose an appropriate person that they feel would have an empathetic understanding of their particular case. They're guaranteed confidentiality, they're guaranteed a very sympathetic and understanding hearing, and they will be provided with strategies which may enable them to either deal with the situation themselves or pursue the issue more seriously should they wish to do so.
Oh, thank you. Well, now that we've got some idea of the legal framework, let's take a look at a typical example of a situation which relates to sexual harassment.
Yeah, look, I haven't got all that long. I have to go and see the principal at 12 about my reference.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Are you going to change your jumper?
No?
Oh, come on, put that white one on. You like that?
Oh, what do you mean?
Oh, you know what he's like.
Oh, look, I've proved myself to be a very good teacher in this school. I'd think that would be all I'd have to do.
Yeah, I know you have, but it's not all. Come on, let's face it. You know what he's like. He's going to ask you to go down the pub for a drink. Go. Doesn't hurt. It's worth $3,000.
You'd expect that appearance shouldn't influence a person's eligibility for promotion. Libby, how do you view that situation?
Well, that particular situation is very typical, I think, where an environment exists where in the past people have perhaps regarded this kind of behaviour as being part of the normal process of behaviour and something they might have to do. The policy and the guidelines now define a situation where, in fact, if a person's value system is such that they prefer not to participate in those games, which we might call that kind of thing a game, then they're entitled to, in fact, just present themselves as the most eligible person with a meritorious record, and they should get the job in that respect.
Ian, can you add to that?
Yes, I can imagine someone seeing that scene and saying, well, fair enough. I mean, you know that works, so $3,000, why not go for it? And I think a lot of people feel that short-term gain is what they should go for. Now, if someone is comfortable exploiting their sexuality that way, well, I suppose that's an individual's right. My own suspicion is, though, because it reinforces the image of women in the workplace as not so much colleagues as sex objects in some respect, if it reinforces some supervisor's idea that he can play those games in making promotions, then the long-term cost may well completely outweigh any short-term gain.
All right. Well, talking about promotion, our next clip provides an example of trying to use seniority to advantage.
Mandy, how's it going?
Good.
When's your next interview?
Oh, about an hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Well, we've got enough time to go down the pub for a drink then.
No, I've got some things I want to do, actually.
Oh, come on, you can't tell me you want to stay in this cold classroom when you could be having a quiet, intimate drink with me in a bar.
Well, that's very nice, thank you, but I've got a lot of things that I have to do.
Oh, come on, we could have a chat about the SDA allowance that they haven't made up their mind on yet.
No, well, another time, perhaps.
All right. If you don't want the SDA, that's nothing to do with me.
The female teacher was put in a very uncomfortable position in that situation. What are the implications of something like that?
Well, I think in that instance, the expression of sexual harassment was quite overt in the true sense of the act, whereby a person's career and their promotion is in fact in jeopardy if they don't in fact involve themselves in the kind of game that that particular senior member of staff was suggesting to the woman. And I think that it's an example where in fact that woman showed very clearly that she wasn't interested in participating in the drink in the pub or whatever else was suggested. And I believe that what has to happen is that people who have power over other people, and in that instance it was displayed as the right to the SDA, that person ought to recognise that a person has clearly said no.
Ian, what are the implications of that sort of psychological harassment?
Well, as Libby said, making an opportunity contingent on accepting an advance is quite explicitly unlawful. But if you go back to the earlier part of that scene, some people will say, well, does that mean I should never invite anyone out for a drink? I mean, can't I be socially pleasant? And I think that the trick that people must learn these days is how to take no for an answer. The only thing that is really objectionable about that man's behaviour, once she signals that it is not welcome, is that he persists and puts the threat in. If he had simply taken her no and backed off, that would not be harassment.
Thank you. Well, these situations so far have involved a senior person exerting influence over a more junior member of staff. There are also many cases where a person of equal status can make another member of staff feel very uncomfortable, as we find in the next clip.
What seems to be the problem?
Oh, it's just not working.
No, it does it all the time. What have you checked to see if there's any paper there at all?
Yeah, there seems to be enough paper.
Well, the only other thing is...
I only need one copy, that's all.
One copy? Well, hang on, just check these, look. Just check these. We've got this button, this button, this button. No worries. No worries, mate. question.
What do you think about that situation? Ian, maybe first.
Well, there are a number of things about that strike me. The first is that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a huge social and cultural environment, one in which boys graduating from school and entering the workforce feel no particular conflict between feeling like they're bits of studs and the fact that they will now have all sorts of employment opportunities, whereas young women entering the workforce feel a real conflict, I think, between their potential role as mothers and a career path. Now, what the power play consists of is very often the man reinforcing that difficulty for the woman and saying to her, look, I'm not going to treat you as an equal colleague, I'm going to treat you as an incompetent woman. And I'm going to sexualise that. I'm going to not only lean across the copier and make you feel less competent than you are, but I'm also going to look you up and down so that you know that's how I'm responding to you.
Libby, social organisations such as schools must provide a lot of opportunities for scenes such as we just saw to happen.
Yes, I think it's worth saying that in our policy we do in fact make reference to the fact that the policy doesn't wish to interfere in the social life of teachers, but rather protects the working environment. And I think in that instance that woman did make it reasonably clear to that man that she really didn't want him standing that close. The space with which he moved in on her made her feel obviously very uncomfortable. And that may seem a very low-profile incident, and it may seem like something that's easily dealt with and scoffable, but it may be one of 25 that have happened that week to that particular person, and it can wear a person down.
I think understandably so. Often situations like that can be open to various interpretations by males and females. This next clip shows one such attitude.
Look, if he does that one more time, I'm going to scream.
Who? What?
Barry.
Barry? What's he done?
Oh, all the hands-on stuff at the photocopy machine. It's just getting ridiculous.
Oh, come on. Not really. Oh, you can't take that seriously. He's only mucking around.
Oh, he's a bit more than friendly. Look, it's just getting ridiculous.
Oh, he's just new here. He's trying to make some friends.
Look, he makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Well, avoid him.
Oh, how can I?
Well, just don't be where he is.
I almost feel like not coming to school.
I'm intrigued. Julie's companion really wasn't very sympathetic. Is that typical?
I think the situation is such that people have varying standards, varying value systems, and Ian has discussed this already, that in fact a situation may occur that upsets Julie, but the other teacher isn't concerned. And I think that what would do Julie best would be to speak to someone who is going to understand her value system and give her an empathetic hearing.
Ian, is it often a common occurrence that people who might otherwise be friends in a workplace seem to exhibit a fairly unsympathetic attitude?
I think so. People feel uncomfortable in general dealing with others' deeply felt problems. It indicates that people have different levels of tolerance and discomfort, and that the principle that needs to be used is respect for someone else's level of sensitivity.
Fair enough. Well, as you've heard, the person being harassed can always take the case to a higher authority, although it doesn't always mean that anything constructive is achieved.
Right, hello Ted. Now, Julie, I have mentioned this very briefly to Ted. I was just wondering if you could go over the main points of your complaint before we decide what to do about it.
Well, I already outlined the story too. Do I really have to go through it all again?
Look, as this is a very serious complaint, I would like you to go over the points again, just so that I've got all the details.
Well, it's just that it doesn't matter where I go in the school, whether it's in the photocopy room or the storeroom or the staff room even. Barry's always there, and, well, to put it bluntly, He's all over me like a rat.
It's going to cause a lot of trouble.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, look, I think we do have a problem here in that Barry is a very friendly sort of chap, and he's always having a bit of a joke.
He's a very popular member of staff.
Look, it's gone beyond a joke. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious.
Yes, well, I know, but I think the situation, you may be just overreacting at the moment. We all know that Barry does get a bit boisterous, and I think that you're just a bit tired at the moment and overreacting to the situation.
Look, that's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, look, why don't you take a few days off? Have a rest. I know the kids get a bit tiresome at this time, and when you come back, if you're still worried by it, well, we'll have another talk. Yeah, well, look, just a word of warning that these things can get out of hand. Now, if I reacted to every story that I hear, we'd have lots of problems at this school. Now, there's actually some stories going around about you that I haven't mentioned.
Oh, what sort of complaints about me?
I've had the mothers from the tuck shop complaining about your standard of dress.
Look, the two issues have got nothing to do with each other.
Well,
I'm talking
I'm
about
sorry,
somebody
but
who
look,
harasses me wherever I go in this school.
right, but I'm telling you, if you bring this situation up, right, it'll just get out of hand. You're going to have the mothers on one side saying that you asked for it with those tight jeans. And it'll end up you'll have to transfer out of here. I've seen it before.
Why don't we just have a rest and forget the whole thing?
Look, you're a bit tired at the moment. Now, look, I'll let you go away. Take your leave, and if you still feel strongly about it when you come back, well, we'll have a word to Barry.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't seem to resolve anything at all. Doesn't the principal have a responsibility to take care of those sort of cases?
The principal does have a responsibility because both were under the Act as a supervisor and within our policy clearly defined a management responsibility to ensure that the environment of the school is harassment-free. In that particular instance, the principal in fact didn't listen clearly to what the person was saying and set up a system whereby the person became more of a victim than they already were when they walked into the room. The room should have been empty of other people. In fact, that other teacher shouldn't have been lounging about there, nodding and throwing in his 5 pence worth. And similarly, the door would best be kept closed so that, in fact, if Julie did want to make a confidential complaint, the world walking past outside would not be viewing the situation.
Ian, with the complaints that come to the attention of your office, is that sort of unsympathetic hearing something that you strike frequently?
Yes, quite often if people have been to an unsympathetic supervisor, that's what happens. I think that he did it all wrong. He didn't give her an opportunity to express her grievance. He didn't respect her confidentiality and privacy. He blamed the victim. His chief concern was to stop his own boat from rocking, and he did something that was specifically unlawful, which was implicitly to threaten her because she had complained of the harassing behaviour.
Right, well, you've seen one unsympathetic example. This next video clip shows a much better way that Julie's problem could have been handled by her principal.
Oh, hello, Julie. Look, come in and take a seat.
Thanks.
Like a coffee?
Well, I'm told.
2 coffees, thanks. White with 1. Won't be a moment. Here we go.
Thanks.
Now, have you already got one of those?
Yes, I have.
Right, well, you can take that one with you just in case the other one is hard to get at. Right, now, before we get on to the substance of your complaint, I was just wondering whether you feel comfortable with me, or is there any other member of staff that you'd like to speak to or have present? Have you spoken to the union?
No, this is fine, really.
Right. Now, in this situation, number one, our conversation is confidential.
Thank you.
And once we've talked through the situation, you'll be the one who decides as to what to do about it. Now, it may mean that we come up with a strategy that, with me having talked to the other person, just to establish the exactly what the problem is. Mm-hmm. It may be that you can resolve the situation with him by yourself. Right. Alternative to that, I could act on your behalf That's depending on really the seriousness of the case. The guidelines state the various steps that you have to take depending on how far that you wish to take the complaint. But we'll be able to decide today as to what action is the most appropriate.
All right, and I'll have a bit of a read through this thing.
All right.
As Libby has already outlined, there are certain advised procedures that can be taken. The sexual harassment guidelines and policy will be available in most schools very shortly, if not already. Now also, if you wish to contact the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, the address is the Ministry of Education, Rialto Towers, 525 Collins Street in Melbourne, postcode 3001, and the post office box number is 4367. You can also phone Libby McMillan on 03 628 2211. To both our guests, Dr. Ian Siggins and Libby McMillan, our thanks for being on the program, and till next time, see you then. Victorian schools can obtain a copy of this program by sending a blank cassette and a dubbing request form to the Videotape Dubbing Service, Curriculum Branch 234, Queensbury Street in Carlton 3053. Interstate school inquiries can be made on 03 628 2113.